The heavy weapons guy is a very impactful class in competitive TF2. Not one you see very often, but when you do see a heavy, oftentimes whether that heavy wins the fight he's taking or not is if not the deciding factor in whether a round gets won or lost. So, as a result, there's a lot of pressure, I guess, or a lot of importance on getting the class right. And today I want to talk about the heavy weapons guys. Heavy weapons. Its loadout, what weapons to use in a competitive setting. And I think you'll find it's pretty different to casual play just because the class is played in more specific circumstances rather than more general ones in casual. So anyway, we're going to begin by talking about what a heavy looks like in sixes, what he's doing, what the strengths and weaknesses are, what you want to accentuate. And then we're going to go backwards, I think, from melee to secondary to primary, just because that's probably going to be the more interesting way to do it, because I definitely have some hot takes. So anyway, let's begin. Heavy is a class that is obviously very defensively potent, so the vast majority of the time that you're going to see a heavy, it's going to be defending last. This is a class that oftentimes an engineer will switch to after the gun goes down while holding last on uber disadvantage. And also a class that you'll just see sitting around revved up if it's some type of like player disadvantage, for example, where you're expecting the other team to maybe take a dry push, and a dry push is a push without ubers being used, and take a lot of space and pressure really hard based on that player advantage. And a heavy is very good at shutting that down. So really good defensive class. One thing I should mention as well, well, a couple of things here. So heavy can be used offensively in pretty uncommon circumstances, but definitely something you see of pushing into last. This is usually like a timing dependent play, because obviously heavy's so slow, you do not really under any circumstances want to slow down how soon you're taking your push because you're waiting for a heavy. So if you don't have to wait for your heavy, especially on maps with fast rollouts like Gully Wash, this is definitely the most common. If you have a spawner who is at the appropriate time to be able to show up on heavy at last, it's really strong, because defensively on last, heavy really serves as a sort of focus fire check. He is the guy you need to get through if you want to win the round and cap the point most of the time. And having that offensively as well is quite nice, because it's a similar sort of thing where, like, if your heavy is up when it's all said and done, then you're probably just gonna win, because he's just a big dude with a lot of bullets. So yeah, very much, or yeah, less often you'll see the heavy pushing into last with uber advantage, but still definitely happens. And by and large, he is just that kind of post-uber fight wall that just poses a big problem for the other team, makes it so that they kind of have to coordinate still, bomb their soldiers, walk into the guy, and just focus fire him down. Because if you're not doing that, and you maybe have a player get in too early, and your roamer gets in early and tries to bomb the med or something like that, or bomb whoever, the demo, etc., then they just get mowed down, and now you're down a guy in the post-uber, and the fight's a lot worse for you. So yeah, that kind of focus fire check is very much where heavy shines. And that other thing I wanted to bring up is a mistake I see a lot of players make, which is think that heavy's just the big guy who the other team focuses. So let me just be revved, waiting for the uber, and then just try and like face eat the uber. That's not good. Because you're just giving the uber a pick, right? And it doesn't really matter if the uber doesn't get to cross to the other side of whatever last they're using into. It doesn't matter that you're like slowing them down and forcing them to shoot at you, because if you die, then the Uber is more than happy with what they got. Because really all an Uber wants into last is space. That's what the Uber needs, I guess. They need a comfortable position from which to stage the post-Uber fight to try and win the round from there. And that usually involves ending on a side and taking out a sentry gun are the primary things. Any picks that you get is really just bonus on top. So when people play off classes to die, I don't really think it's good, namely on heavy, and something you see on pyro as well, of just like dying in the doorway, where you need a really, really good stuff with your air blast for that to be worth giving up your life, as opposed to playing with a gun where you can back up and survive, or on certain maps you can play the doorway, such as Metalworks Last on the right side. You can play that doorway while still living and backing up and conceding space, and that's very effective. But anyway, just a little aside there. So with that in mind, what unlock should you be using as heavy? I think in general, not always, but in general, what makes a strong unlock is something that kind of accentuates the strengths of the class and the strengths of the role. Examples I can think of are, for example, the crossbow, the gunboats, just weapons that very much accentuate what this class is already good at and makes it even stronger. And we're going to see some of that, I think. That's kind of just bearing the lead, I guess. But anyway, as far as melee is concerned, definitely the least important unlock for heavy. I think the most common you see is the Gloves of Running Urgently, which makes sense because oftentimes heavy is a class that is switched to a lot of the time from that engineer spot. And as a result, a lot of the time you're going to be in spawn and you want to get to a position quickly. And the trade-off of losing some of that max HP to get to a position where you can contest point or even be the guy stopping point can be quite nice. That being said, I don't think it's super impactful whether you're using this thing or not, because like you can, a lot of the time, like especially if you're switching to it from engineer, you can just switch earlier and yeah, not really have to worry about that timing constraint of like that extra second. Yeah, it's just not that impactful. This is a heavy to mid item, I suppose, which is definitely annoying and not fun to play against ever, but it's also not very good in my opinion. So it's not really something you see, fortunately. But yeah, Gloves of Running Urgently, probably the go-to melee. I personally use the Holiday Punch just because that one lets you do the Putus Pow taunt, whereas the Gru does not. And that is important enough to me because heavy is also a funny guy, I guess. Anyway, oh, I should mention as well, you are not seeing, you're seeing casual heavy footage just because I don't really play Scout very often. I mean, I don't play much TF2 right now, but I definitely don't play much Scout. And when I play Scout, I don't really get many heavy highlights, I would say, just because, again, it's such a niche situation. So I'm just throwing something on the screen for you guys, just because it's probably more interesting to see someone playing heavy rather than not. And I want the video to get made rather than not. So yeah, as far as secondaries are concerned, this is one that very much diverges, I think, from casual, or rather some new developments here. My opinion has kind of been changed because almost everyone would go with the sandwich. I know like some like Reddit heavy mains are probably using like Second Banana and are like typing up comments about how like it's technically better or whatever, but it's not a sandwich. So, but yeah, it's just like the classic heavy item. Giving you a full heal is huge. Being able to drop half health packs for your teammates is huge. And that's kind of just the default option you see a lot of the time in sixes. If you are one of those, in one of those situations where your heavy is not someone just being switched to, but rather someone who's already up on heavy. One example I can think of is playing a heavy in Heaven. on process last, something you'll see occasionally. In times like that, if you have the sandwich, you may as well just drop it for your med in case he eats a rocket or something, and now he's full HP again. It's also funny too, there are some clips out there, which I'm probably going to be unable to find for this video, of players, enemy players that are pushing in, eating the other team's heavy's sandwich that was dropped, and being able to like push more successfully because of that, which is funny, but obviously doesn't happen very often. And more often than not, the heavy just does not do anything with the secondary slot. So things like the banana or the Dalikos, or the steak sandwich, which is, I guess, like a heavy to mid item, are, not really used. As far as the shotguns, though, my opinion on this has changed quite a bit. I think in part because of my friend Slug, who loves using shotgun heavy, and he loves it maybe a little too much because he'll be like pushing into lobby on shotgun and whatnot. But I think there is a lot to be said about having the shotgun on heavy, which is kind of unintuitive because it's like, you have the big gun. Why don't you just use that? And part of the reason is just because of these situations you're seeing heavy in. So for the same reason that you see heavies using the gloves of running urgently, because they kind of need to get to the point, and you can't just get to the point with a minigun while doing damage. Well, you can with a shotgun. So the shotgun makes heavy way more mobile than he otherwise would be while also dealing damage. And yeah, that's something that's valuable. I know in, I think the recent Poland, Tomas had maybe like a multi-kill with the shotgun. That's a clip I'm going to have to find and put in here. But I think that's a great highlight and great example of why the shotgun can be so valuable. Just because it's a huge difference in shooting a heavy who's revved up and shooting a heavy who's much more mobile, at least by heavy standards, and who can output really high burst damage as well. So shotgun, despite being in a slot that you would expect to be kind of just, unimportant, I think can actually be quite valuable for those niche circumstances of, I want to be pretty mobile right now while being able to do damage. One thing I should mention as well with the sandwich is not necessarily unexplored territory, but something you don't see too often, which is possible, is eating the sandwich to just tank damage. I think it was, because it gives you a lot of healing, right? I don't know if does it give more than your max HP, but it just happens to like heal up to max. I don't know the exact numbers on it, but it does heal you up to max HP bare minimum. And I think there's clips out there, maybe it's bot mode, actually like tanking a push by eating the sandwich, because first of all, like the sandwich healing, plus if you're getting like arrow tanked or healed by a med, like that is a lot of damage to go through. And if the other team's not like coordinating that well or not like bursting it well enough, then you can just be the the lunch distraction, I guess. It's really funny. But obviously not like, don't equip the sandwich and start eating it every last hold, to say the least there. But something worth mentioning about that. I wonder if the Dalikos as well is like worth using as like a pre-buff before the, probably not, because all things considered, like if you are up on heavy before holding last, like before they've pushed, you should be full buff anyway. So, because it doesn't, although does the Dalikos increase the amount you can get buffed? I don't think so. It's still like 450, right? Anyway, let's move on to the primary. And this is where the hot takes really come out, because anyone who's been watching TF2 6's streams, not so much anymore, I don't really bring it up nowadays, but historically I have been a huge Brass Beast supporter, and there's some reasons why that we'll get into. First of all, the Hulong Heater is just the worst option. It doesn't really offer much. You'll see sometimes if a team is like running Pyro as like a gimmick or something, they'll bring out this is really only a Goblin Zone thing, but they'll bring out the Hulong Heater, and it's definitely funny. But just choose through ammo has a damage nerf, I guess. Yeah, damage penalty. And not really any benefit for well, actually, I'll get to that in a moment. Not really any benefit if you're not running a pyro. That being said, no other, like, this thing is shockingly effective if someone gets like so close that they actually get lit in fire by your ring, which actually does a lot of damage. But obviously that's like such a niche case and doesn't actually really happen. Natasha banned for good reason. I think a lot of casual players would like it banned in casual play. The slow is super disruptive, makes it way easier to collect kills. And another big thing about it is that damage resistance. Because again, remember, on these last holds, when you're actually seeing heavy, he is the focus fire check. And if he has effectively more HP because he's resistant to damage, then it becomes much harder to actually take out the heavy, and much harder to win the round as a result. So Natasha would just be perma used, I would imagine, if it were allowed, but it is not. Now, the Tomislav. And this is definitely the preferred option for most heavies who just play heavy wherever. It feels good to use. I think that's part of the reason why it's so popular among competitive players, is because a lot of, well, the people switching to heavy are scout mains. So having a gun that's faster and is more accurate feels good. Like, it feels way better to rev faster when you're switching to a class that's so slow from a class that's so fast. And I'm sure that there's spreadsheets out there and videos comparing like the damage at range and whatnot between Tomislav and stock, and like Tomislav is just like better and whatever. But I'm gonna posit that the spin up time really doesn't matter much for sixes play when you are defending last, because if you're already alive on last, you can just be revved, right? If you're in heaven, for example, or just not revved. Because in either case, you're either going to try and get some damage in before kiting, or you're just going to play to kite immediately, or play to like take out bombs if you're revving or whatever. Point being, the only time that the rev actually matters is when you're trying to get to point as fast as possible. And yeah, that's really it. And besides that, the accuracy also matters a lot less in the context of you're using this thing on last, because you're not really fighting at much range. And that being said, even last points that have a lot of room, such as your process, or let's say even like a sunshine, the fact that you're doing more damage to players at range doesn't really matter, because the damage itself is just not much. Like, it's not worth sacrificing anything, and you are sacrificing the firing speed, so that's close range damage you're sacrificing to be able to pepper players across the map more effectively. Like, so what? It's not a way you're going to be collecting kills. And again, at the end of the day, whether a player holding top right on Sunshine after an Uber takes 30 damage from you or 40 damage, which is probably already like an extreme example of the difference there, I would imagine. That's not going to change whether they leave or continue to push. What's actually going to decide that is things such as like how much spam they're able to focus on players, how healthy like other players are. Well, health obviously matters, but not so much on like the combo, for example, who can just get beamed. Like a heavy is not going to be the deciding factor there compared to stickies, compared to rockets, things of that nature. So yeah, that long range damage, while it might come into play in certain last points, it's really not what the heavy is there for. And it's already so minor that the fact that it's better means you're like increasing a smaller number, as in the benefit is just in a literal sense smaller, right? yeah, I think in general, Tomislav in a 6s setting is worse than stock because you really, really want that up close damage. Because again, as a heavy, it's about whether you get collapsed on effectively or not. And you are also like a point defender. And for pretty much all of this, it's going to come down to, can you kill the soldiers that are bombing you? Can you kill the players that are walking at you? Or can you kill the players that are capping point? And in all of these, close range damage matters a lot more. All right. And I will talk about stock because it's just, well, I'll talk about stock last, I suppose, because it is a really viable option. I do think it is better than Tomislav. And again, this is like my hot take. I know not a lot of players agree. But finally, we have the Brass Beast. And this thing is crazy. So the reason people don't like using it, who don't like using it, is because of the speed, obviously. It's super slow to spin up, and you almost can't move at all while you're revved. Now, I think that the spin up time obviously sucks, but I think the slower move speed while revved matters less, just in the sense that you can kind of walk further before revving to account for it. So, yeah, you're not going to be able to kind of rev early and then corner peek a point, for example. I'm thinking of like snake water in my brain right now. You're not going to be able to rev earlier and corner peek that. You might have to just walk into them and then rev. So it's obviously like tangible downsides. But the damage bonus is huge because, and it's actually surprising how quickly you kill, for example, a scout. Players get caught off guard by this. They think that they can just run down a heavy like he's a normal heavy, and then they just get completely destroyed. The damage bonus is absolutely huge. And my super hot take is everyone likes using the Tomislav if they're running like crits for whatever. This is like super not important because like, oh, let's crits our heavy out of last is like the most gimmick thing ever. But Brass Beast, it's RNG for sure. Whether you're hitting, it's a lot more random than the Tomislav, but when you hit, it is so worth. It's like completely destroys people. But anyway, not important. Yeah, damage is good, and being able to do that much damage that close makes a huge difference in whether you are surviving or not, and whether you're able to effectively be a heavy on last. Because remember, this is the situations in which we're seeing this class shine. Now, I'll mention that the Brass Beast, and this is probably the big one for me, has the same damage resistance as the Tomislav, which is massive. Pipes are going to be doing 80 damage rather than 100. Yeah, and just all sources of damage are going to be diminished, which makes it so much easier to like clutch those very like thin margin fights that could go either way. Maybe I'll put up a clip here from a shadow play video of mine in which I actually like went and counted the number of times that the damage resistance saved me in a fight, which by the way, if you want to see these shadow play clip dumps, then consider being a channel member. But anyway, yeah, the damage resistance is really, really nice, and I think often understated. Yeah, I think in general, when I am pushing into a last, if I hear that the enemy heavy is on Brass Beast, I'm like immediately on a higher level of guard. I know that what I'm about to do is going to be harder than if that same heavy were on a different minigun, just because it has such good characteristics for strengthening what a heavy's already good at and what a heavy's already used for, rather than trying to like shore up the downsides, I suppose, while also making his main job less effective. Yeah. And just, man, hearing that Brass Beast rev on last, it's like, God, why couldn't this dude be on the Hulong heater? Okay, no one's using that. But yeah, I think that's probably it for the unlocks. I'm looking forward to the heavy mains telling me that I'm delusional because of some like spreadsheet or whatever, or like actual numbers they've looked at for these items that I just have not looked at or considered. But I'm just speaking from experience, having used these different unlocks and also having played against them, I'd say more often. Yeah, I do think that in particular, like the one gripe I have, everyone who brings this topic up in like Twitch chat or whatever when I'm doing a cast and mention the minigun, they think that I'm just like the Brass Beast super fan, and Brass Beast, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. But it's like that or nothing. It's really more so just I think that Tomislav is severely, severely overrated, and I think using stock or Brass Beast is like a big step up. And I do think that a lot of the reason that people use Tomislav in sixes is just because it feels better to play with, rather than actually being better for what you're trying to do as a heavy in those situations. So anyway, that is all about the heavy weapons guy, Pudis, whatever you want to call him. We all love him. And he's got some interesting unlocks that are worth considering. And it's also an example of how when these off classes have very specific niches, you can really explore a lot of things there. And it might change up how the class gets used or what you want to really be focusing on compared to other settings. Like, for example, in casual, I can see the Tomislav being much better just because things like the faster rev are going to be much better if you're just playing around wherever parts of the map and you could be kind of jumped or surprised at any time. Although I do still love Brass Beast, even in casual, just because I do have a weird attachment to the gun at this point, I guess, from having advocated so long for it in sixes. But anyway, that's all from me. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, feel free to like the video, subscribe, all those things. And yeah, I do have channel memberships if you want to support me financially. Is there anything else? Oh yeah, the Discord. Join the Discord. I think I might have a little thing, like a card for it right now. I don't know if that works or not. I think it does. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. So yeah, see you all later.